Tonight on Buffy
The Vampire Slayer.
You have to trust someone.
You trust me.
Her destiny is to destroy the evil ones.
This is my fight. Stop saying that!
Demons sworn to kill the Slayer.
We're playing straight into their hands.
I can handle this.
But this time, the chosen one may not be the one they're after.
It is a trap. Just isn't for her.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, next Monday.
There was a little girl who had a little girl right in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very, very good. But when she was bad, she was horrid. Yes, when she was bad, she was horrid. But when she was bad, she was horrid.
And we're back after far too long a hiatus. I am, of course, speaking of the summer of 1997. After a 3.5-month-long hiatus, Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 2 premiered on the WB, with a full 22 episodes in contrast to last season's 12. Season 2 is a bit more polished than Season 1, with more of a cohesive theme and overall character arcs that propel the established characters onto new ground. That does not, however, mean that Season 2 is free of problems. While better than Season 1, it still contains the show's growing pains. Technical difficulties, clunky scripts, and overall plot problems that stem from improvised rewrites. Joss Whedon was planning Season 2 during Season 1, so that he wouldn't have to scramble should the series be renewed. It's known that he told Anthony Stewart Head what was coming, but intentionally left the rest of the cast in the dark, a fact which annoyed Sarah Michelle Gellar, who said, "He won't tell us what's gonna happen next! He knows, but he won't tell us!" I think that's very rude. However, Joss had to ditch these plans. Originally, Season 2 was to continue where Season 1 left off, with the Anointed One leading the Order of Aurelius in further attempts to kill Buffy. But Mutant Enemy encountered a major problem. Kids grow up, and the Anointed One is supposed to be young forever. Suddenly that whole plotline they thought up just wasn't going to work. So they wrote over the Anointed One season with another idea for the big bad, a pair of vampires from Angel's past, Spike and Drusilla, who in the third episode show up, kill the Anointed One, and take over the Order. The new plan was that Buffy would kill Spike halfway through the season, and that Drusilla would become the main villain until introducing surprise villain Angel, who loses his soul due to stipulations in the original spell. This then fell through when audiences unexpectedly fell in love with Spike.
And I was supposed to be like a dirty character that nobody really liked, and it didn't really work out that way.
And they rewrote large chunks again to keep Spike around as the main villain until Angel, and give him a satisfying departure. What this leaves us with is a season of 3 separate iterations haphazardly fitting together instead of one solid narrative. This brings us to the season premiere, When She Was Bad, written and directed by Joss Whedon. It's a decent enough introduction to the second season and its overall plot. Elements of the season finale are very subtly foreshadowed by Joyce and Principal Snyder's offhand comments, in contrast to the clunky clip show prophetic dream in Season 1, Episode 1, Welcome to the Hellmouth. However, it is grounded inside a section of the season dedicated to the Master's legacy, and I believe it displays remnants of the original iteration, where the Anointed One was intended to be the big bad. As such, it's kind of hard to analyze based on knowledge that comes from episodes that extend beyond the range of the Anointed One episodes. There are a lot of assumptions people make in retrospect that may or may not have any bearing on what Joss was thinking, particularly as has to do with the significance of Buffy's behavioral changes. The events of Season 1, Episode 12, Prophecy Girl were traumatizing for her, and she displays some effects in common with PTSD: irritability, lust, aggression, and generally pushing people away. Fans remember this episode as the PTSD episode, one of the few episodes to focus on the effects of Buffy's trauma and her psychological well-being, along with such episodes as Season 3, Episode 4, Beauty and the Beasts, Season 6, Episode 5, Life Serial, and Season 7, Episode 7, Conversations with Dead People. However, I think this perspective misses a key piece of context that separates it from Buffy's overall psychological health. I think she's not just suffering trauma. I think she's affected by whatever gave her exceptional strength in Prophecy Girl.
I've got a theory.
In my review of Prophecy Girl, I shared a theory that when the Master drank from her, there was a two-way power transfer. He getting Slayer power and she getting vampire power, that only manifested in her after Xander revived her. I speculate that this was foreshadowed in Season 1, Episode 10, Nightmares, where Buffy assumes the form of a vampire, and in this state defeats a character symbolic of the Master. This explains her line,
Oh. Now I feel strong.
backed up by casually throwing bad guys around. This storyline was shortly dropped, retconned away as merely saying that Buffy found the strength to defeat the Master, with no mention of that added mystical strength. But I think that it was planned to be developed in the original iteration of Season 2, with Buffy versus the Anointed One. At one point in When She Was Bad, Xander speculates that Buffy's strange behavior is demoniac, as a result of the Master biting her. Giles shoots this down, but I think that saying that Buffy's behavior in this episode is purely a result of trauma is a retcon. I think that it's the second iteration of Season 2, written over an earlier script, setting up the idea that Buffy is now part vampire. With this interpretation, the episode can be considered a first effort of concepts used more fully in Season 4, Episode 2, Living Conditions, where a demon sucks out Buffy's soul while she sleeps, and the Scoobies are forced to deal with a dangerous psychopathic Slayer until she gets her soul returned. It's possible that this basic plot was to be the arc of the original Season 2, and that the second iteration shifted it over to Angel. The version of When She Was Bad we ended up with is connected to the ultimate Season 2 narrative, but might be best interpreted as a rewritten introduction of these elements that were never followed up on. Similar to the 1941 film The Wolf Man, being best interpreted as one script clumsily written over a previous script. As such, I will be addressing both the interpretation of Buffy as traumatized and as part vampire.
You think you know what you are, what's to come. You haven't even begun.
The plot itself begins with Xander and Willow walking outside at night, playing a movie quote guessing game. The reason why they're so nonchalant is because they think the danger is over. The Hellmouth is closed, the vampires vanished into the night, and they've had a very boring summer, with no supernatural occurrences. Buffy went to stay with her father for the summer, and Sunnydale has done just fine without a class protector. The two of them have a cute moment, and it seems like we might have a genuine Xander and Willow romance. It's the perfect time for one, coming up organically and not with Xander seeing Willow as a second-rate replacement for Buffy, and when neither of them are with anyone else. The rules of drama say,
No way.
and they're interrupted by a vampire. Hey, perv! And are rescued by the returned Vampire Slayer. Now Xander is distracted and has his focus on Buffy, and Buffy just seems generally distracted, maybe a little aloof. Trauma symptoms. She is reluctant to talk to Giles, associating him with the mission that led to her death. It's a bit unfair given that Giles was actively working to subvert the prophecy, and that Buffy's the one who saw it through. But Sarah Michelle Gellar's great acting effectively communicates that this is about Buffy's emotions, more than hard facts, and it's very respectful.
I don't see this being settled with logic.
Aside from a brief Giles-Jenny Calendar flirtation in Season 1, Episode 8, I, Robot, You, Jane, and possible Angel-Giles subtext, I go down with my ship, Season 1 was pretty clean of any romance for the adult characters. Not so in the second season, as When She Was Bad starts off the Jenny-Giles romance, in parallel with the increased romantic energy of the teenage Scoobies. As we'll see, sex is a big theme of the season. In the original iteration, it's possible that Buffy would have been lustful because of a vampire personality, but it's also plausible that Sunnydale is just beset with a case of the raging hormones this year. I blame the Hellmouth. Giles explains that even though the Hellmouth is closed, it still draws supernatural evil. He says nothing about it suddenly acting up, though, which makes it kind of weird that there were no Summer Anointed One incidents, or something like, say, the arrival of a traveling carnival of skinwalkers to keep things interesting. The show eventually hangs a lampshade on this by saying that the Hellmouth cyclically acts up in the months in which the show takes place. Buffy coldly agrees to train, and she very passionately throws herself into the practice. She gets triggered with a flashback of the Master and gets carried away, breaking the punching dummy. Anyone confused by the concept of being triggered, this is what it means. A familiar activity reminds you of a time of trauma, you get emotional, and you can do something stupid. It's a respectful depiction of a common problem that a warrior may have, and it serves a respectful depiction of Buffy. Giles tries to reach out to her, but Buffy rejects him. She refuses to be emotionally vulnerable and keeps herself closed off. The show empathetically depicts this as a huge problem. It rejects the cold, apathetic warrior image, popularized by the many male power fantasies that feminists label as toxic masculinity. As much as we support Buffy as a power fantasy, we want her emotionally healthy by displaying her vulnerabilities to her friends. Meanwhile, the Anointed One gathers strength. He leads his vampire forces to recover the Master's bones from the grave where the Scoobies buried them. They sanctify the ground with holy water, making the vampire's flesh burn as they touch it, but the Anointed One insists that they dig with their hands. This display of cruelty emphasizes just how evil vampires are. I'm sure we would never see one of our heroes doing something like that. Buffy has a prophetic dream warning of the Master's return. Joss trolls us by presenting the dream as though it were reality, until the point that Giles attacks her and turns into the Master. The scene can be considered a practice run for Angel Season 4, Episode 10, Awakening, which is a whole episode like that. In the dream portion of Awakening, all of the characters and plot elements are shallow, stereotypical versions of a standard Angel episode. And the dream can be considered a study of Angel's mental image of his life as much as it is a suck for the viewers. Though much shorter, this scene accomplishes the same thing for Buffy, where we get to see her mental image of her friends, in addition to a prophecy that may or may not come to pass.
Dreams are meaningful.
Dream Willow and Dream Xander are chipper and jokey, and Dream Xander makes an inappropriate comment about liking Buffy's bosom. Harkening back to his behavior in Season 1, Episode 5, Never Kill a Boy on the First Date. But I want to think that this is a stealth critique of Season 1 Xander via dream. Just because it's what Buffy thinks he'd say, doesn't mean he would ever actually say it, or that Buffy's real response would be so passive. Notably, what he does say the next day is similarly sexual, but not entitled, and could even be called respectful of Buffy's boundaries. As a counterpart to Dream Xander's inappropriate comment, Dream Willow starts to say that she had a sexy dream about Xander, but realizes that she's talking in front of Xander and tries to stop saying it, putting her foot in her mouth in a manner that's really cute. I almost want to write it down as a quote, but Willow didn't really say it. This is Buffy's mental image of Willow. These two comments stand as things that Buffy thinks her friends might say. It's worth noting that both comments are about sex. While it may be accurate that Xander and Willow are increasingly interested in sex, and that Buffy can faithfully reproduce this in her dream, it's likely that this is a reflection of Buffy's own growing interest. Buffy's subconscious controls the dreamscape, so if she's getting turned on, it stands to reason that her dream denizens are too. Her anger at Giles manifests in him attacking her and turning out to be the Master in disguise. He says that he killed her once and will do so again, a prophecy. Whether or not the prophecy can be subverted is unclear. The Master's resurrection is halted at the end of the episode, but the character does return to the show in the form of an alternate universe counterpart, and kills Buffy's counterpart in Season 3, Episode 9, The Wish. Could Joss have been thinking that far ahead?
Sure.
Yeah, I
Let's
think,
Let's do that.
Well, if he had ideas for Season 2 during the production of Season 1, it stands to reason that he had ideas for Season 3 during the production of Season 2. On the other hand, the fact that the Master does not come back at the end of the episode, and that there are some Buffyverse prophecies that do not come to pass, could suggest an element of free will. I think it's reasonable to presume that the events put forward in the dream have a chance to happen in some form, but that ultimately it's up to Buffy, and any actions she may take as a result of having the dream. She wakes to see a nighttime visitation from Angel, cloaked in heavy vampire romanticism. See, these were the days when they cared about making him look vampiric. Angel warns her about the Anointed One and tries to reach out to her. For a moment, she starts to show emotional vulnerability, but covers it up with a hard, cold display of contempt and sarcasm. Her responses take a turn for the outright mean, and Angel awkwardly leaves. Just as Buffy starts to soften, she turns to find Angel gone. She is left alone with her vulnerability. The next day at school, Buffy references Angel's visit, and Xander and Willow imagine that something sexy happened. It's a humorous moment because they act similarly to how Buffy imagined them, but it's not quite the same. They're speculating about Buffy's love life. Though neither Xander nor Willow have quite moved on from their respective crushes, they're not just repeating the same pattern from Season 1 as seen in the dream. Most significantly, Xander does not cross the line by perving on Buffy like Dream Xander, and cannot be blamed for the actions of Buffy's mental image of him, any more than he can be blamed for the actions his body undertook while being possessed by a hyena. He doesn't quite live up to the Quincy Morris ideal, but he has developed since Prophecy Girl, and can respect Buffy being with another guy. He doesn't actively cheer for Buffy and Angel like Willow does, but he supports Willow's shipping and is a supportive friend to both Willow and Buffy. We aren't just running in place, there is actual character development. Gee, I hope nothing happens to make Xander think that he still has a shot.
When she was bad, she was horrid. But when she was bad, she was horrid.